All right, here we are next to a Hesperocyparis sargentii in the Cupressaceae. And, this is the charismatic megaflora here of the serpentine woodland. And we haven't talked so much about serpentine yet today, but I hope you guys have, on the trail will notice all these green rocks. This is a characteristic of serpentinite, this kind of greenish cast to the rock. And sometimes if the green rocks, they get oxidized, they'll turn reddish, and you'll see a lot of reddish rocks around here too. And if you look around at the landscape here, you'll see that the serpentine woodland here is basically shrub dominated, but there's an upper layer, right? And that upper canopy is dominated by Hesperocyparis sargentii, the sargent cypress. And really looks pretty, these layered canopies, almost like a Japanese garden. And the mountain bikes are also very picturesque. So sargent cypress has fibrous bark, and it's usually kind of grayish in color, so dark, and it has vertical furrows. And so that's one good character for sargent cypress. And then I'm going to walk over here, and we're going to see some leaves and some cones. So this is our first introduction to what we call scale-like leaves. So some of the gymnosperms have these kinds of scale-like leaves that are really tiny, and they're just kind of borne on these stems. And you find cypresses will have these kinds of leaves, and also junipers. And if you just looked at the foliage, oftentimes I don't know if you'd really be able to separate out a juniper from a cypress. They often, both of them have these kinds of pattern of stomata, these kind of X's, white X's on the green background. But the big difference between junipers and cypresses is that cypresses have kind of these soccer ball looking cones. And these soccer ball cones, this is kind of they are what we think of as closed cones, but in a hot day or in a fire, they'll open up and they'll kind of crack open like this, and the seeds will come out. Whereas junipers have kind of fleshy, berry-like fruits that are can be different colors, that are actually dispersed by animals. So cypresses, there are several different species of cypresses in California, and they generally are very geographically restricted. So you almost never find more than one cypress in any given location. There are a few exceptions to that, but this is the one that is the serpentine endemic. It actually has a pretty large range for a cypress in California, because you do find it at a lot of the different serpentine areas in Northern California. But there are other species, like there's a Tecate cypress that's only found in the mountains behind San Diego. There's a species called Baker cypress that's in the mountains of the Klamath. And they're generally they have a very restricted geographic distribution. And then they don't have anything particularly diagnostic. There might be, if you read in the book, there's probably something about whether there's glandular dots on the scales. I've never found that to be particularly satisfying to look at in the field. But I will tell you that the foliage can vary in color. So the sargent cypress is said to be a little bit more grayish green. We'll learn Monterey cypress later in the class, and that one is much more of a bright green in color. And then the size of the cones also can be a character that you can see. So the sargent cypress cones, they're pretty big for a cypress, but the Monterey cypress has bigger cones. You'll see as you walk around here, you'll see younger ones that don't have trunks, big trunks at least, and they look just sort of like little I'll just say juniper bushes because that's what they look like. They are young cypresses, and you can see that one right there already has cones. Maybe we should take a look at it because I think you'll see that the leaves are no, they're exactly the same. Yeah, they're kind of just maybe a little more yellowish green, but they have the same look to them. So that's your Sargent cypress. It is a serpentine endemic. It is one of the few plants here. There's several of these plants that we've seen today that are only found in serpentine soils. They're endemic to it. But really, there aren't that many trees that are endemic to serpentine. Sargent cypress is one of them. And that might be just due to the kind of relatively young age of plants that are colonizing California. There's only been tens of millions of years since the serpentine habitat kind of got uplifted and has been kind of accumulated in large areas here in California. So there hasn't been really that many, millions of years seems like a long time, but it takes a long time for species to evolve and become separated from their lineages. So maybe there'll be more serpentine trees if you come back to California in 30 million years. But this is definitely one of them. Cypresses, of course, are a very old evolutionary lineage, and they're reasonably diverse here in the western U.S. So Sargent cypress, endemic to serpentine soils, dark, vertically furrowed, fibrous bark, scale-like leaves, and soccer ball cones.